If you've been struggling to hear God's voice, this one's for you, part 3. Hey, welcome to Wrestling with Catholicism, a place where we pursue truth, goodness, and beauty by investigating life's questions through the lens of the Catholic faith. I'm your host, Sam Wenzel. Parts 1 and 2 focus largely on how to hear God's voice and kind of separate it from all of the other voices we hear, and how to cultivate a relationship with God through prayer so that we can get better at hearing His voice. Today we're going to talk about the big decisions and how to hear God's voice and discern God's will for us through these decisions. In life, you'll have maybe 4 or 5 really big decisions that basically affect the context of all your future decisions. So these might be like what college you're going to attend if you're going to go to college, right? Making that decision one way or the other, you're going to have totally different circumstances, totally different opportunities. So this is a big decision that's going to affect future decisions. Same thing with vocation, future career, if you're going to move to a city, stay in the same city, things like that. And we want to be able to hear God's voice and make the right choice in these decisions, but it can be difficult to know what He wants us to do. Oftentimes, we might think it'd be so much easier if God just came down from heaven and wrote into stone for us and handed us a stone tablet. This is what you need to do. First, you do this. Second, you do this. Third, you do this. And that's how you're going to end up at the final destination. And it would be so much easier, but we need to remember that easier does not always mean better. Here, the easier option doesn't leave any room for faith or trust or relationship. Jesus invites us to walk with Him. He doesn't just point us where to go and tell us to leave Him and do it on our own. So how do we do this? How does this actually work? Imagine discernment like going on a road trip. Jesus is your navigator, and the answer to what's God's will for me in this big decision, that's your final destination. Jesus is going to tell us how to get there turn by turn. He's not just going to tell us a final destination and then sort of check out as we're on the way there. In fact, if He would just tell us a final destination, we could even kick Him out of the car and still follow road signs to get ourselves there. But what's the purpose of the final destination? The purpose of the final destination, the answer to these big questions like what vocation or what career, is basically to bring us to a place where we can be closest with God and we can bring God to others. So it wouldn't make sense for God to just give us that final destination without preparing us to be there, without making us establish a good relationship with Him, without allowing us to have a little bit of struggle so we learn to trust Him, depend on Him, love Him, and walk with Him, so that by the time we get to that final destination, we already are equipped with a strong relationship with Him to be able to succeed where we are going. Now, this doesn't mean it's going to be a blind choice, right? God doesn't just tell us, like, okay, flip a coin, choose, and that's what it's going to be. Think of like a flashlight, okay? If you're walking and you have a flashlight, you're not going to see a mile out in front of you. You're going to see your next step. Your next step is safe. You take that step, and now your next one is illuminated. After you take a mile worth of steps, you're going to see what's a mile in front of you. And this is sort of the same way. As we are walking with Jesus, as we are listening to His direction, like take this turn up ahead, take this action, maybe take advantage of this opportunity, and we act on it. We take that step, we take that leap of faith. Eventually, after doing that over and over, our final destination naturally becomes illuminated. So to give you some context, I'm going to share a little bit about my own discernment of vocation and some of the things that I learned along the way. So in the beginning, right, just how we started this video, I was asking God, like, okay, just make it super clear signs so I can't get this wrong. I want to know what you want me to do, and I want to do that thing, which sounds amazing and humble at first, but then the more I thought about it, the more I came to realize it was coming from a place of not trusting God. Not trusting that regardless of what I did, He would still love me. Regardless of what I did, He would still provide for me, be there for me, walk with me. So I wanted God to just tell me what to do so I didn't have to trust Him. I also wanted to be able to blame Him if things didn't go right. I didn't want to have to take responsibility for a huge choice like this because I was afraid of the unknown. And after I started to realize this and sort of wrestle with that, like, okay, like I'm not going to get there just by asking God to reveal it for me. And really not doing anything. I'm going to get there through prayer, through spending time with God, through this process of a relationship with Him, similar to that road trip. So the first thing was consistent prayer. I hadn't been really consistent ahead of this point, but I started praying consistently, showing up to prayer, even in the times when it was hard to feel God's presence. I was still committed to showing up because I knew that going there every single day is how I'd build that relationship and learn how to hear the voice of God better, because whether I could hear it or not, I knew God was speaking to me in some way. And the next part of this is through prayer, I started having these ideas like, okay, like there's this opportunity coming up, and I felt really pulled in that direction. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of nervous, I'm kind of scared, but I feel like this is something that I should take advantage of. So this is kind of like God using the flashlight to illuminate that next step, kind of pulling me in that direction. So then I took that small leap of faith. It doesn't have to be a huge one of choosing that vocation right away, but that small leap of faith, like just show up to this event, show up and meet these people, show up and talk to this person, have this conversation. And by taking those small leaps of faith, right, stepping that next step, taking action, I started to gain more clarity on where God was calling me. Not just, what does God want me to do with my gifts and talents, but where am I going to be closest with the Lord, and where am I going to best serve Him and bring Him to others? And after about a year, I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure this is what it is. So God, if it's not, I want you to totally derail my plans, but I'm going to start taking bigger action steps. And Lord, if you bless this, if this is what you will for me, then allow it to happen. And as I started taking these bigger action steps, even though I was still sort of afraid of the unknown, everything started falling in place. God was making straight the path for me to enter into this. And now, after a year of going, through that process, now I'm engaged and preparing for the vocation of marriage. So this one big decision that is going to affect the context of the rest of my life really wasn't one big momentary decision. It was a series of small decisions, small action taken as I was walking in faith in relationship with Jesus, and He took me by the hand and led me to this place where I just sort of naturally ended up here. And this is true with any big decision, whether it's maybe you are thinking of a career change. If you're praying and taking small action steps, sometimes you feel the sense of peace, right? The sense of joy. You're like, okay, I really think that this is where I want to go. The Holy Spirit's giving you that feeling for a reason. Keep leaning into it, keep following it, but don't stop praying. Remember to stick with Jesus through that whole time. Maybe you start taking some action steps and you start feeling really anxious. You're like, I don't know if this is right. I don't feel good about this. You're also probably getting that feeling for a reason. So maybe start looking at a different direction. And kind of the self-reflection is best done during prayer, when you're able to hear the Lord speaking into your life and what's kind of going on. And there's a lot more that can be said about discernment and trying to hear God's will for you in these big decisions. And there's a lot of really good resources out there, but ultimately what it comes down to is prayer, walking with Jesus, taking that time out of your day consistently to hear Him and to spend time with Him, making decisions, taking these small action steps, and then trusting that God will be with you, whether the action is ultimately leading you closer to your end result, right? The final destination, whether you're getting closer to knowing, like, okay, this is what I'm going to choose, or whether you are kind of going the other direction, but then you're kind of checking one thing off. One of the options, you're like, okay, I started going this direction, didn't feel good about it. I know it's not that. So that's one less option to choose from. So ultimately, if you're walking with Christ, regardless of where you're going, you're still going to be getting closer to your final destination. So trusting Him through the process, taking time consistently in prayer to hear Him, and just taking these small leaps of faith, which ultimately will make the large leap not a large leap, just another small leap along the path. I hope that this helped. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment. If this video helped, leave a like and share with a friend. And as always, go be lights and stay salty.